everybody, and welcome to this episode of the CCC Digital Brief with Mark O'Loughlin and the Cloud Credential Council. Now, in this series of the CCC Digital Brief, I'm asking global digital experts to comment on the impact that COVID-19 is having on organizations and how digital technologies and services can help. Now, on today's CCC Digital Brief, we are joined by Swaroop Oggu. Swaroop is a consultant in data engineering at Halcyon Solutions based in New York, USA. Swaroop, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to speak to you and CCC Brief. I'm glad I could answer your questions.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, to start with, Swaroop, tell our listeners, what industry do you work in?
Sure. So basically, I'm a technology consultant working primarily in the financial domain, primarily serving banks and the insurance and the retirement annuity sections. So that's primarily my job.
And I think interesting times and a very interesting sector to be in at the moment.
Yeah, I mean it's completely a different different set of time, and so much has changed pre-COVID and post-COVID.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're saying so much has changed in, who would have thought, 2 to 3 months? Just it's amazing, isn't it? Now, can I ask them, because the sector you're in, the financial sector, as you said, is one part of it. Ultimately, how has that industry and the customers of your industry, how have they been impacted by COVID-19?
Well, to start with, it was a crisis, and it was a crisis which we were not prepared for, and then the financial sector has followed a 3R paradigm where they reacted first. They reacted, and then the response had made them go past the compliance and the regulatory requirements. Mm-hmm. And that was the first thing that they could do. And then once they reacted, they had to reevaluate and reevaluate the whole strategy. So their projections, their forecasts, the way they work, the way how to go implement new set of requirements for the technology has changed completely. And then finally they started reinventing themselves. And then,
Oh no, I think that's very important. I think that 3Rs model is quite good, to react into reinvent. And I think they're the times we're in at the moment. So we've had a reaction. We're still having to react because things are changing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. We're seeing now across the globe in certain parts ramping down of restrictions that's been put in, but in other parts of the world are ramping up of restrictions. Now, finance like that doesn't live in one geography. It's a global highly complex, large supply chain throughout the globe. That I think in some cases where you've reacted then reinvented, you're having to react again based on what's happening in another part of the world. So it seems to be challenging times ahead, no less, I would think. Have you seen anything like this in all your days or all your experience in the finance sector?
No, there were days like that. It's complete dichotomy, right? So one side we are seeing a crisis, and one side we need to have new processes, new models in place that can handle this sort of crisis, which did not happen even if you go back to the 2008 crisis. We did not have to reinvent because the whole model slopped down. But in this case, it's different. For example, the stimulus package, the payment protection program, or whatever the new regulations taken care by the government had to be implemented on the financial section side. So that is in sense creating a necessity to urge to go implement the digital transformation at a whole new scale. Some of these items have been exposed as the processes that are not working. For example, there's a New Jersey government where the mainframe systems did not work when they were processing the payment protection program, and which was difficult for the government to process. Now they had to scale up the whole.
And we're seeing this scale and change happen at an unprecedented level where in, say, your industry, the finance industry, that could have taken 5 years, 10 years, or whatever that was to
Mm-hmm.
see that type of change happen. But we've seen it happen overnight. Having to change systems, having to update systems, having to, as you said, find out the things that haven't quite worked, but we didn't want to quite change that we could work around.
Right.
That's amazing. The other thing, and I'm interested in this because I think banks, in fairness, around the world have been adopting digital technology for a number of years. Now, there's still things like mainframes and legacy, but we know they have to remain for reasons.
Yeah.
Then you have your traditional IT, but lots of banks and financial institutions have been adopting cloud. I think there's been a good adoption of that within the sector to a point. One question I might ask you is more about the people side of this transformation.
Mm-hmm.
That a lot of banks had to send people, like every other organization, send people home, get them working from home, get remote working quickly. Like
Yeah.
you left the bank on a Friday
Right.
with your laptop or even a desktop or whatever equipment you could take from the office. On a
Exactly.
Monday morning, you're set up at home doing the
Yeah.
things. Has that been a struggle for the finance sector, or have people just reacted because out of necessity?
Yeah, I mean, initially that was the case where things did not fall in shape because there are a lot of compliance and regulatory requirements for banks' data to be worked upon, right?
Yeah,
And the primary raw material for us to work on at this point of stressed effort is to handle this sort of crisis situation is data.
yeah,
And without having an ability to get your work done on outside of the workplace is pretty difficult. And that's when the reaction, the first respondents, the first response they did was to ensure that they have some sort of ability for the workforce to start working on, because
yeah,
that would delimit them to address the crisis. and
yeah.
and it worked very well. And they have, I think the banks were the primary organizations where the requirement to have the workforce work in the workplace was mandatory, and moving them to the remote is a good change, and I think is a welcome change all around the industry.
Yeah, as I said, I think it's brought us 5, 10, maybe 15 years in the finance sector into the future very quickly. As
Hmm.
you said, there was policies to have in the finance sector. I know some other sectors, the staff on site and on premise to
Hmm.
do with the nature of the data and the
Yeah.
security and all these things required. But all of a sudden, just out of necessity, you still have to maintain those levels of security, data privacy, but you're having to really sweat your digital assets and digital tools
Yes.
to put that wrapper around to make sure people can still work.
Exactly.
Because we know even during a crisis like this, we still need an operating financial system. We
Hmm.
certainly don't want a financial crash happening right now, or the
Exactly.
inability for finance to work during a pandemic.
Hmm.
We don't want those types of money worries here. And can I ask, I'm interested from the finance perspective. We've seen a lot of organizations, what I use the phrase digital acquisition, acquire tools like for remote working, Teams or Zoom or Skype or whatever that is. Um, so acquiring those tools to do remote working, but and calling that digital transformation, as opposed to acquiring
Mm.
digital tools to transform how the digital does
Yeah.
business. So I see a mismatch between people acquiring digital technologies as opposed to transforming with them. Do you see that happening in the banking financial sector as well, that there can be a misunderstanding of if I get a tool, is that acquisition or transformation? Do you see that happening?
Yeah. I think it's a very good question, and probably most of them are looking at their own strategies, like
Mm.
how to figure this out, how to figure out the difference, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of churn going on in the new digital tools coming in, and they have to, as you mentioned, they have to classify
Have you
which
dropped
is.
a lot?
I know I'm you okay? You able to hear me?
No, that's okay. You're back. Yes, you're
Yeah,
back.
yeah. So what I was saying was, like, the organizations have to classify what are the tools they're acquiring,
Yes.
as not as a transformation, because transformation involves people, process, and strategy, and at the
Yes.
last, technology. So probably they have to rethink that digital acquisition is the ground zero of transformation, where they can start. That's the stepping stone. That's the ground zero, like where you can, that, this is where a change has been implemented, and then that's working for the, how your remote collaboration is working. They can, they have to probably classify them into two buckets, and then that's how they can niche out.
You did say something very important there that I really, really like. So the digital acquisition being ground zero of your digital transformation.
Yeah.
I like that because it puts the two together, because you don't
Yeah.
have digital transformation without the acquisition part. But equally, we see too many organizations at the moment acquiring some digital tools or technologies or services, but not transforming how they do business, which means they're not getting the digital transformation stage. And I think right now during COVID, more than any other time, at least in digital history, we need organizations to think about using digital tools and technologies to create that ground zero, but thinking about how are we going to change how we do business, because everything has changed from COVID-19 at the moment. I think that that's a very good way to relate that. These changes we see brought on by COVID, do you see them changing anytime soon, or will this, over the next 3-6 months, or are we 1 year, 2 year, 3 years before we go back to normal? Do you have any view on that in the financial sector?
I don't think so. This is going to settle down. Probably in terms of the way the banks think. I think they will still keep this in mind, and then they probably strategize around it and not through it. Like, go past 6 months, they probably can't visualize in that way. I think their strategies around constructing around these sort of crises, and then figuring out a way where they can still engage with the customer and then deliver the services that they've been doing, earlier, pre-COVID.
Yes.
But I think these times, this COVID has brought a whole new canvas of digital transformation opportunities for them to, to focus on what were the things that did not really work. Whereas it used to be a tedious task for the leadership or the strategy to figure out what things don't work, because banks are pretty big processes. They have hundreds of lines of business, hundreds of lines of workforce, and so many people and too many processes. So COVID has exposed those things that did not work probably, and then their focus has retained to those. And I think they'll have that complete realignment of the strategy in terms of the processes, and then I think they will be a very good stepping stone for the whole digital transformation canvas across the globe.
Yeah, I think it focuses the mind there. There is that phrase, never waste a crisis. And I think the banking sector is looking at that. I don't think that, whereas in the past they may have used a financial crisis to rationalize and all that kind of stuff, I don't think they're looking at it from a rationalization point of view. I do get the feeling that a lot of in the finance and banking sector are actually looking to address those problems of the challenges we've had in the past that we've not fixed, that we've worked around. Let's address it now, because now's the time to do it. We have the technologies, or we're having to acquire the technologies to do that, but let's do something with that now. And you made a very good point there about strategies. You mentioned a 6-month strategy, whereas in finance previously you'd have a 5-10 year view of a market, and then mini strategies in there. I think that's been turned around, and we can't see 5 years in the future. We can't see 2 years in the future because we don't know.
No.
And then one half of the world could be different to another half, or we could be in different segments at different stages of coming out of COVID-19. And we don't know what a winter will do, things like that. Really good, really good. So I think for any organization watching this is, whatever your medium to long-term view was, maybe still have it, but do it in 6-month chunks, so that you can be very adaptable to whatever happens. If the market moves and we can get out of this quicker, move with it. If we end up retrenching and having to go back into a lockdown environment for a period of time, go with that. But you'll be going into it this time with, I've already done an iteration of a lockdown, probably not been able to do too much business, Now we understand what happens in lockdown. Things don't stop. We just have to do things differently. How do I then get ahead of that? 6-month thinking might do that. Um, Stroop, can I ask, so digital services such as IoT, blockchain, big data, AI, are they going to fundamentally change the finance sector over the coming years? As you said, because of this clean sweep now that we have to address the things from the past, but also what these technologies do. For example, AI and blockchain in the banking sector might be really good things to think about.
Yeah, I think it's the best time for organizations to focus on the IoT and the blockchain. And I
Yeah.
believe what would happen at the end of the day, would there be a cognitive digital transformation where the all of these components talk, and they probably will generate a transformation API. I know when organizations collaborate and they talk to each other in terms of transformation, in terms of the,
Yes.
and there will be there will be a huge scope for the platforms, because platforms churn out the data. Platforms generate that talking between systems.
Yes.
You have all these different components like AI, blockchain, IoT, and all these talking, and then one cognitive system. And that makes the organization to be very cognitive, to know what is happening, to know what is incoming, what is going out, and the data lakes would be put to the best use in an organization. So I think it is the best time for any organization to have all these things, come into a bundle,
Yeah.
and the digital transformation to be cognitive in its own sense.
And we said it earlier, never waste a crisis, I think, and sometimes spend in a crisis because it's probably the right time to do it. Transformation API, I love it. I like what you mentioned with that, um, pulling all of these together to get that cognitive view from
Yeah.
the business, and a label of transformation API in an organization. I can see that. I can see that being a good pivot point to try and aspire to.
Yeah,
Not a technical API, but a transformation API within an
API.
organization.
Yeah.
I think we need to look into that a little bit more.
Mhm.
Shub, can I ask, in the coming 6 to 12 months, nobody knows what will happen with COVID. There's some plans happening, countries coming out of lockdown, countries going into lockdown. In the finance sector over the next 6 to 12 months, can you think of any of the biggest changes that is going to happen?
I
Well,
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. The biggest change that I would think is probably the collaboration that's going to happen across the financial sector is going to be unthinkable, and that would lead to a whole new suite of products, whole new that are
yes,
suited for such situations where they can handle. And there is also going to be this necessity of collaboration and communication across the customers, across the enterprises, across
yeah,
the financial sector. They're going to unify. And what's the biggest change that I would be seeing is a lot of products going to be platform oriented, and a
yes,
lot of focus is going to be on infrastructure as a code, SaaS
yes.
and PaaS platforms taking their front seat. And a lot of banks which used to shy away, or which used to go from cloud, would want to more be omnipresent on all the cloud channels to
That's
scale up.
right. Yeah, typically in my experience anyway, globally, banks have been kind of conservative
Yep.
in the use of certain clouds and certain SaaS and certain platforms. I have a feeling that's going to go away now as well.
Yeah.
As you've said it there, we've got to look at the past and see what can we fix, not with the future, but now.
Yeah.
And I think these platforms will drive us in. I think customers are willing to try something different, try something new, and will expect a different experience.
Hmm.
So we're having to live differently at the moment. We've got tap and go on our phones, Apple Pay, all these kind of financial things, which if this was 15 years ago, it would
Hmm.
be very hard to live through. But we're finding it's a little bit easier because as consumers, we're consuming more digital products and services.
Yes.
They've been brought out by some of the banks and financial institutions, and I think there'll now be the recognition that to engage more with the customers digitally on these platforms is where we have to go. We still have to maintain security, data privacy, GDPR, and all these different rules and things.
Yes.
But certainly we can revisit our people, our process, our procedures. We can build on the technologies on ground zero, digital acquisition,
Mm-hmm.
to try and figure out a better story, a better way of doing business. Because, like that, in the finance sector, we want to be in business, we want to help customers. They will want to do business, they will need to spend.
Yes.
How do we pull all of this together? And I think the tools are there. It's about how do we remodel our business. I think it's interesting that if the finance sector is looking to do this on a global scale, that anybody listening to this episode has to think that whatever sector they're in is facing the same challenges. COVID-19 doesn't discriminate. All
Yes.
sectors are going to be facing challenges, facing, different ways, having to think differently. So if the banking sector have to change, whatever sector anybody else works in is having to change and change significantly. I don't think it has to be difficult, because we can always say, well, these are challenging times and we just have to do it,
Yes.
rather than before COVID, change was difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I think COVID has been, let's say, an amazing change agent. I know there's a lot of suffering and pain behind it on the other side, but notwithstanding that it has made people think, and I think those that think differently in the sectors that think and do differently might make it. It's good to hear, refreshing from some of your insights into finance, that we can think finance is old and finance doesn't
Mm-hmm.
change, and these kind of things. From what we're hearing, I think it is, and I think that's for the better
Yeah.
at the end of today.
Yeah.
Now, Swaroop, final question though for you. It's a personal question.
Mm-hmm.
When all of this is over, we don't know when that is, so I can't say when, but when all of this is over, what one thing are you going to most look forward to doing when it's done?
Yeah. I mean, to at least get out of this is what is running in my mind. But
Absolutely,
I
yes.
but I but I believe the one-on-one interaction, the personal,
Mm,
is what builds a level of trust across customers, across clients, or across businesses, right? And what I want to see is there's a new set of, at the end of all of this, there's a new economy, new set of tools that are in place to do
yeah.
what we used to do previously, and
Yes,
with
yes.
considering all these that are in place, right? Uh,
Absolutely, yeah. I think you're right. Number one thing, priority, is getting out of this safe and well, and hopefully
mhm,
our listeners as well deal with that. But then after this is the excitement of what are these new things that we've
mhm.
discovered, and what have we invented, and what have, out of necessity.
Yes.
Necessity being the mother of invention. I
Mm,
love that. I say never waste a crisis. I know there's difficult times for people
mhm.
there, but for those that don't experience that, it's what can we do differently to get on with this and to get through the other side. We don't know what the new world will
No.
be after this,
Yes.
and how long it will take to get back. I don't think there's going back to any normal that we've come from before,
Mhm.
but I don't mean that in a negative. It's new world, new thing. So let's try and deal with this or live with this, and see how we come out of it the other way. I
You
think that's
summed it
good.
up.
I think you've given us a good insight into the finance sector as well. Very conservative sector, but has been pulled into the future 10, 15 years
Yes. Yes.
quicker than they expected, which is
Mhm.
not a bad thing at the end of the day.
Yes.
So that's really good. Swaroop, Oggu, thank you so much for joining us on the CCC Digital Brief. I think your insights have been really good. So thank you again.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks a lot. It was great speaking to you.